He walked into the house, unaware he had already become a pawn in someone else's game. The home he had built through years of relentless work had turned into a stage for betrayal, where every gesture, every word was a weapon. Beneath the surface, calm lay a meticulously crafted trap, set by the very people he trusted most. And when the first card fell, data vanished, files burned, he had no idea it was only the beginning. What looked like coincidence was, in truth, a calculated takedown of his life. His beloved wife, a manipulator with a legal accomplice. His mother-in-law, a co-author of the scheme. Everything he had, his business, his home, his reputation, had become a target. But he wasn't a victim. He was an architect. If anyone could rebuild a system from ruins and turn chaos into control, it was him. And now, they had one serious problem. They picked the wrong opponent. Greetings, my dear friend. I am very happy that you are watching my video, and I will be even happier if you subscribe to my channel. This will make me even happier. Let's get started. Dorian Carter turned the doorknob and stepped inside, fatigue etched into every line of his face. At 43, he had risen from a modest background to become a leading name in software architecture, crafting cybersecurity frameworks trusted to safeguard some of the nation's most critical secrets. His stately colonial residence in Oakwood Heights was the tangible reward of more than 10 relentless years of ambition and sacrifice. "I'm home," he called out, his voice echoing through the high-ceilinged foyer. Marissa appeared from the kitchen, hands drying on a dishcloth. Their 10-year marriage had always felt like the one consistent thread in a life dominated by deadlines and pressure. At least, that's what Dorian used to think. "You're late," she said, brushing a quick kiss against his cheek. "Mom's staying with us for a while. She's upstairs unpacking." Dorian stifled a groan. Vanessa Templeton had never made a secret of her dislike for him, and the sentiment was mutual. But for Marissa's sake, he kept things civil. "Perfect," he muttered. "I've still got to finish the Larson proposal tonight. This could be a huge step forward for us." "You're always buried in work," Marissa replied, already turning back toward the stove. "Your dinner's in the microwave." He watched her retreat into the kitchen, noticing how fast she picked up her phone, a faint smirk forming at something on the screen. Later that evening, tucked away in his office, Dorian's phone buzzed on the desk. It was a message from his business partner, Raymond Dorsey. "Dorian, someone accessed the prototype folders. Security flags went off. You know anything about this?" Dorian's eyes narrowed. He had built their infrastructure with multiple fail-safes. Unauthorized entry should have been impossible. "Not from me." "Lock everything down. I'll start combing the logs first thing." What Dorian didn't know was that this incident was just the tip of the iceberg, an opening move in a betrayal that had been quietly unfolding for weeks. Upstairs, Vanessa Templeton sat on the edge of the guest bed, speaking softly into her phone. "He's back. Are we still on track?" The voice replying belonged to Philip Wallace, a corporate attorney who had once served as Marissa's confidant and, more recently, something far more personal. "Stay the course," Philip said. "3 more weeks and we go forward." The unspooling began 5 days later. Dorian returned from his morning run, sweat still clinging to his skin, only to find a sight that froze him in his tracks. Vanessa seated at his desk, his computer sputtering with warnings and corrupted files. "What are you doing in here?" he asked, tension rising in his voice. Vanessa jumped. "Oh, I was just tidying up. The room was dusty and your computer kept flashing all these alerts. I ran a cleanup program and—" Everything went nuts. Dorian rushed past her to assess the situation. His stomach dropped. The entire Larson project folder, months of proprietary work, was gone. The recycle bin was empty. The backup drive, normally plugged in, had disappeared. "What did you do?" he whispered, his hands moving frantically across the keyboard. "I only wanted to help," Vanessa said, slowly backing away. "They say cleaning the system makes it run better." Marissa appeared in the doorway, eyes sweeping across the room. What's going on? Your mother just deleted everything, Dorian said, forcing his voice to stay even. The Larson files are gone, completely wiped. Marissa's face tightened, but not with concern, more like irritation. She was only trying to help, she snapped. You act like it's the end of the world. Don't you have backups? The backup drive's missing, Dorian said, pointing to the empty docking port. Marissa's expression shifted briefly. Something flickered behind her eyes, before she quickly masked it. You probably left it at the office and forgot. Don't jump down Mom's throat for trying to be helpful. Helpful? Dorian gave a bitter laugh. That project could have secured our biggest client ever. Now it's just gone. You're overreacting, Marissa said coldly, stepping beside her mother. Let's give him space to cool off. That night, Dorian faked sleep. Around midnight, he heard Marissa slip silently out of bed. He waited, then followed. From the kitchen, hushed voices drifted through the hall, Marissa and Vanessa deep in conversation. This is dragging on, Marissa whispered. Philip says we need to accelerate things. We're moving as fast as we can, Vanessa murmured back. Wiping those files was a solid blow. Without that proposal, his company's in serious jeopardy. Marissa's voice grew sharp. When can we take his name off the house? Philip says once his business collapses, we file. Hit him when he's at his weakest. Dorian stood frozen in the shadows, his world splintering. The woman he'd built a life with was conspiring to ruin him, hand in hand with her mother and some lover hiding behind a lawyer's title. He slipped back into the bedroom, heart hammering. He wouldn't confront them. Not yet. Dorian Carter hadn't built a cybersecurity powerhouse by acting on impulse. No, he would approach this as he would any breach, pinpoint the vulnerabilities, collect his proof, and when the time came, strike with precision and without mercy. Dorian arrived at the office the following morning without betraying even a flicker of what he had uncovered. On the surface, he was the picture of a frantic professional, distraught and desperate, urgently calling cloud service reps and IT consultants in search of a way to recover seemingly lost data. But beneath the mask of panic, he was setting the stage for a calculated retaliation. His first call went to Raymond. I need a favor. No questions asked. Say no more, Raymond replied without hesitation. Their friendship had deep roots, college roommates, bound by late-night coding sessions and mutual respect. Raymond had seen Dorian evolve from a scholarship student into a rising star in the tech world. I need surveillance equipment, the best, completely untraceable. There was a pause on the other end. What's going on, Dorian? Marissa and her mom are plotting something. There's a guy named Philip involved. They wiped my data. It wasn't an accident. You have backups, right? They're gone. I'm nearly certain they took those too. Raymond muttered a curse. What's the plan? Dorian's voice hardened. I'm going to beat them at their own game. Within hours, he had converted a forgotten storage closet into a makeshift command center. High-end micro cameras, hidden mics, and surveillance tools were prepped for installation at his home. Meanwhile, a thorough background check on this Philip had already begun. His phone, however, never stopped buzzing. By the end of the day, Marissa had sent 47 texts, each message more anxious than the last. Dorian, are you okay? Mom feels terrible about what happened. Please call. Are you sleeping at the office again? I'm worried. The bank called. Did you really withdraw $1,000 in cash? Please respond. One message stopped him cold. He hadn't touched their joint account. That money wasn't withdrawn by him. They were already making moves on his finances. That night, while Marissa and her mother were conveniently attending an urgent charity function she insisted couldn't be missed, Dorian returned home. In less than 2 hours, he had the place wired. Cameras hidden in ventilation grills, audio bugs tucked beneath the furniture, and a sleek device capable of duplicating any phone linked to the home's Wi-Fi network. The background report arrived soon after. Philip Wallace, divorce attorney with a specialty in high-stakes asset division and corporate breakups. His office? Just blocks from the yoga studio Marissa frequented religiously. 4 sessions a week, supposedly an hour each, yet she'd vanish for 3. As Dorian finished planting the surveillance, he accessed Marissa's laptop. Her password was laughably easy, their anniversary. What he discovered confirmed his worst suspicions. Hundreds of emails between her and Philip, dating back 18 months. What started as legal hypotheticals evolved into flirtation, then full-blown intimacy. The most damning file, titled Exit Strategy, a detailed guide to dismantling Dorian's company, draining their accounts, and building a false narrative of professional misconduct to use against him in court. Just then, his phone vibrated again. Marissa's 48th message. Almost home. Mom made apple pie. Your favorite. She wants to say sorry. Love you. Dorian didn't feel anger. He felt something sharper, clarity. 10 years of partnership, love, shared goals. It had all been a lie. But they'd made a grave mistake. They underestimated the wrong man. Dorian's entire career was built on identifying threats and neutralizing them before they could strike. He composed his first reply of the day. Be there soon. Can't wait for the pie. As he drove, he made himself a quiet vow. By the end of this, Marissa, her mother, and Philip would know exactly what it meant to lose everything. For the next 21 days, Dorian maintained his disguise to perfection. A man unraveling under stress. He pretended to fall apart over the missing data, played up his anxiety as the Larson deadline loomed, and accepted Vanessa's syrupy apologies and Marissa's faux concern with just the right amount of brokenness. All the while, he monitored their every word and movement through the network he'd set up. What he uncovered was darker than he imagined. Philip wasn't merely an affair. He was a tactician, a legal hitman with a record of guiding wealthy clients through brutal court battles. Dorian recognized 3 names from Philip's past case files. Former clients of Dorian's own company. Each of them had suffered suspicious data breaches shortly before public, catastrophic breakups. This wasn't just infidelity. It was calculated sabotage. Digging deeper into Vanessa's financials uncovered another motive. Gambling debts. She'd taken out 2 mortgages on her home and was now staring down foreclosure. Marissa bleeding Dorian dry would be her salvation. Then came Tuesday. While pretending to be at work, Dorian tracked Marissa's location to the Westbrook Hotel. Using spyware from the cloned device, he activated the microphone. Philip's voice came through clearly. We've got a problem. He's not reacting the way I thought. Too composed. I figured he'd unravel, start drinking again, something we could exploit. Dorian froze. He hadn't had a drink in 15 years, not since the loss of his parents in his early 20s. Marissa had never even known him during that chapter of his life, and now here she was, hoping he'd relapse, just to gain an edge. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was warfare. He's always needed to control everything, Marissa muttered, irritation creeping into her voice. That's what makes him unbearable. Every step he takes is deliberate, rehearsed to perfection. There's no spontaneity, no emotion, no risk-taking. We need to move things along now. The property transfer papers are finalized. The man sitting across from her responded calmly. As soon as he signs off on the refinancing documents, believing they're connected to his company's capital, we'll be in a position to access the equity. What's the status with the business? Marissa leaned in slightly. I've reached out to Raymond. A shiver ran down Dorian's spine as he listened from the shadows. He's reluctant, but I reminded him of what went down in Phoenix. He's not eager to see that resurface. The threat was obvious. If Raymond, Dorian's most trusted partner, agreed to testify about past errors, the company's valuation would plummet right before the divorce proceedings. Raymond was being coerced into betrayal. That was enough. Dorian ended the recording and reclined in his chair, mind racing. The enemy's web was more intricate than he'd guessed, but now he had ammunition. That evening, he dialed Raymond's number. Not over the phone, he instructed. 3 hours later, they met at a nearly deserted roadside diner lit by flickering neon far from city limits. Dorian skipped any small talk. They got to you. Raymond's expression fell apart. Dorian, I didn't know how to handle it. Wallace paid me a visit last week. He's aware of Phoenix. That incident, a near-catastrophic misstep in the company's infancy, had been Raymond's fault. But Dorian had taken the public blame to protect him. What are they asking for? They want me to say you've been reckless, that you've been making poor decisions, putting everything at risk. They're pressuring me to leak sensitive client data, to paint a narrative of total collapse. Raymond looked like he might be sick. I haven't given them anything. But if Phoenix comes out, I'm finished. Dorian's face was unreadable. Go along with it. Raymond blinked. You want me to cooperate? Tell them you're in. But everything they receive, every file, every so-called leak comes through me. Will feed them exactly what I want them to see. For the first time in weeks, Dorian allowed the corners of his mouth to twitch into a grin, sharp and devoid of warmth. Raymond shifted, uneasy. You're setting a trap. I am, Dorian said, voice like ice. And when it's done, they'll wish they'd never heard my name. To dismantle their scheme, Dorian understood he had to sell the illusion. He began orchestrating a slow, believable descent, visible cracks in a mask that remained unbroken beneath. He came home late, his shirts faintly scented with alcohol he never drank. His search history was deliberately seeded with terms related to depression, financial collapse, and divorce lawyers. Every phone call was staged to hint at crumbling finances and desperation. Marissa and Vanessa, unaware of the ruse, basked in what they thought was their success. Surveillance cameras captured their whispered celebrations. It's unraveling even faster than we hoped. Vanessa giggled one night, assuming Dorian was away. Philip says if he keeps spiraling like this, we can file soon and clean him out. Marissa laughed, a sound that once meant everything to Dorian, but now cut like broken glass. He still thinks I care about him. Tried to kiss me yesterday. I faked a migraine just to avoid it. While they toasted their apparent victory, Dorian quietly reinforced his empire. He discreetly opened a network of shell corporations, hidden under layers of legal complexity. Funds were siphoned into offshore accounts, invisible to prying eyes. Every conversation, every slip, every betrayal, they were all recorded, cataloged. And most importantly, he resurrected the Larson proposal, one encrypted file at a time, recovered from backups only he could access. Then came the night that would test his ability to perform. Philip Wallace showed up for dinner. Introduced as an old college friend Marissa had reconnected with, Philip oozed smugness. Dorian didn't so much as blink at the subtle signs, the wandering hands, the secretive smiles. He played the oblivious husband to perfection. Philip's a corporate lawyer, Marissa chirped, pouring a glass of wine. Is that so? Dorian asked, pretending interest. Work on anything high profile? Philip flashed a self-assured smirk. Most of it stays under wraps, but I specialize in helping people protect what's rightfully theirs. How noble, Dorian replied, raising his glass. To keeping what's rightfully ours. A few days later, Dorian's surveillance system captured another crucial exchange, this one inside Marissa's parked car. He actually believes I'm still on his side, she told Philip, chuckling. He lets me manage everything. Bank accounts, the paperwork. Once he signs those refi forms, thinking it's for a business loan, we get full access to the equity. 400 grand gone before he notices. Do you have the forms ready? Philip asked. They're in my desk. He signs tomorrow. He's under so much pressure from work, I won't have to push hard. With that, Dorian had the final piece of his immediate strategy. The trap was nearly complete. That night, while Marissa slept soundly in their bedroom, Dorian slipped into her home office and discreetly replaced the real refinancing papers in her desk with counterfeit ones he'd spent weeks perfecting. To the untrained eye, they appeared unchanged, but hidden within the dense legal language were precise edits that shifted everything. Instead of securing Philip's assets, her signature would now place them into a trust that Dorian secretly controlled. The following morning, Marissa greeted him in the kitchen, offering a smile and a mug of freshly brewed coffee. "Honey, I know the business loan's been stressing you out," she said in a soft voice. "I went ahead and finalized the paperwork, just like you asked. All that's missing is your signature." Dorian took the pen and signed without a flicker of hesitation. His expression remained unreadable. "Thanks for handling this," he said. "I honestly don't know what I'd do without you." She leaned in and kissed his cheek with a warm smile. "That's what I'm here for." As she turned and walked away, Dorian allowed a faint, icy smirk to appear. The gears of his plan were now turning. But just as things began to fall into place, Dorian's carefully laid scheme encountered an unexpected disruption. On Friday afternoon, Marissa's younger sister Nina arrived unannounced, wheeling a suitcase through the front door. Nina had never shared her sister's or mother's obsession with wealth and appearances, and her brutal honesty had always made Marissa uncomfortable. "Surprise!" she called out cheerfully. "Just finished my fellowship in Costa Rica. Thought I'd crash here for a few days before heading up to Seattle for the new gig." Dorian watched as Marissa and Vanessa's faces tightened. "Nina," Marissa said, forcing a smile as she hugged her sister with visible restraint. "We didn't know you were coming." "That's the point of a surprise," Nina replied with a grin, before turning to Dorian and giving him an enthusiastic hug. "How's my favorite brother-in-law?" "I've been better," Dorian replied coolly, concealing his curiosity behind casual small talk. Nina's sudden reappearance meant Marissa and Vanessa could no longer speak freely, and Philip would have to stay away to preserve the illusion that he was nothing more than a family acquaintance. Later that evening, with Marissa and Vanessa out running errands, Nina cornered Dorian in the kitchen. "Okay, what's actually going on?" she asked, eyes narrowed. "This place feels tense, like everyone's waiting for something to break. And Marissa, she looks at you like you're a puzzle she can't quite figure out." Her bluntness made Dorian pause, and then, after a moment of internal debate, he made a choice. He gestured for her to follow him out to the patio, far from listening ears. "I'm going to tell you something," he said quietly. "But it stays between us." He laid everything out, the suspicious documents he'd uncovered, the surveillance he'd pieced together, the conversations he wasn't meant to hear, and the larger game he realized he'd been caught in. Nina listened without interrupting, her face growing darker with every revelation. When he finally stopped, she exhaled deeply. "I wish I could say I didn't see this coming," she said slowly. "But Marissa's always been just like our mother. To them, everything's transactional. People are just another kind of currency." She looked at him steadily. "So what's your plan?" "They need to learn that actions have consequences," Dorian replied, voice low and deliberate. "Real ones." Nina studied him carefully. "They're still my family," she said, her tone measured. "I'm not looking to hurt them if that's what you're afraid of," Dorian said. "But when this ends, they'll be stripped of everything. No fortune, no reputation, no safety net. And as for Philip, he's gotten away with this before. Not again." There was a pause as Nina considered his words, then her eyes sharpened with resolve. "I want to be part of it," she said. Dorian blinked. "Come again?" "I want in," she repeated. "Not because I hate Marissa, but because someone needs to make her answer for what she's done. She's been manipulating people her whole life without ever paying a price. That stops now." Dorian hadn't expected an ally, especially not from inside Marissa's own family. But Nina's deep understanding of both her sister and mother, combined with her background in psychology, might prove invaluable. "There's something else," she added, her voice dropping. "Marissa's done this before." She hesitated. "His name was Wesley Barnes. They weren't married, engaged, actually. He had a promising political career. By the time she was finished with him, he'd lost everything: his reputation, his future. He vanished overseas and changed his identity." The revelation hit Dorian like a blow to the gut. He had always suspected Marissa was manipulative, but realizing this was part of a repeated pattern gave him a chilling clarity. "I'll need proof," he said. "Correspondence, documentation, anything that links it together." Nina nodded. "Mom keeps everything. She's obsessed with leverage, boxes of letters, emails, notes stored in her attic. She thinks it gives her power, but it's actually her biggest weakness. I know exactly where the key is." That night, the two of them stayed up late, putting together a new version of the plan. With Nina's insider knowledge and access to her mother's archive, Dorian finally had the means not just to escape the trap, but to unravel the entire legacy of lies and deception that Marissa and Vanessa had carefully constructed for years. Just as their conversation drew to a close, Dorian's phone buzzed. It was a message from Raymond. "Wallace just confronted me again. They're accelerating the timeline. Looks like they're coming after you next week." Without saying a word, Dorian turned the screen toward Nina. "We've run out of time," he said flatly. "Then it starts tonight," she replied, her voice hard as steel. Once Marissa and her mother were asleep, the wheels would be set in motion. What once felt like a tense standoff was now transforming into a calculated offensive. Dorian had been preparing for a cautious engagement, but with Nina beside him, he was ready to tear down everything his enemies had built. For the first time since discovering the betrayal, a flicker of grim resolve ignited within him. Marissa, Vanessa, and Philip had all made the wrong gamble. They'd underestimated the wrong man. That same night, the operation began. As Marissa and Vanessa slept, Dorian and Nina drove 3 hours straight to Vanessa's secluded estate. Nina used a key she'd known about for years to let them inside. Together, they climbed to the attic and unearthed boxes filled with meticulously labeled records. Evidence of schemes, blackmail, and manipulation, all archived by Vanessa as her personal safety net. "She never lets go of leverage," Nina said, her voice low in the thick, stale air as they hauled the boxes down. "She thinks it makes her immune. What she doesn't get is she's been stockpiling her own conviction." Back at Dorian's headquarters, they began analyzing every document. What they found exceeded Dorian's worst suspicions. The files tied both Vanessa and Marissa to multiple past incidents, each echoing Dorian's situation. Wealthy men dismantled, their fortunes and reputations destroyed. Philip Wallace's name surfaced repeatedly, dating back more than 7 years, solid evidence of a long-standing conspiracy. But the most damning item was a private journal. In it, Marissa described in disturbing detail how she had targeted Dorian. She had first approached him at a cybersecurity event, already armed with intimate knowledge of his finances, personal history, and psychological vulnerabilities. "She referred to you as the project," Nina whispered, reading aloud. "She knew about your parents, your past with alcohol, your need for validation." Each sentence hit like a hammer. Dorian didn't react. He couldn't. The pain had long since hardened into resolve. By morning, they had the documents sorted into categories: legally actionable, career-ending, and emotionally shattering. With their arsenal in hand, Dorian initiated the first phase of retaliation. Raymond played his part flawlessly, arranging a meeting with Philip under the pretense of joining their plan. During the meeting, he handed over falsified corporate files. Clever forgeries that, under scrutiny, would point directly to Philip and Marissa as the perpetrators. At the same time, Dorian made his first direct move. He reached out to Wesley Barnes, Marissa's ex-fiancé, now living under a new identity in Portugal. When Dorian finally got through, the man's voice was cautious. "I don't know who you are," he said. "That chapter of my life is closed." "I'm her husband," Dorian replied. A long silence followed. "Then I'm sorry," Wesley said eventually. "Even if I wanted to talk, which I'm not saying I do, I signed NDAs during the settlement." "They were signed with Marissa Palmer," Dorian countered, "not Marissa Carter. Legally, that makes a difference." It was a calculated bluff. He wasn't certain it would hold up, but he had a strong suspicion Wallace had been sloppy with the paperwork. "And I'm not asking you to talk voluntarily," Dorian added. "You'll be receiving a subpoena." By the next day, Dorian had filed sealed lawsuits against Philip Wallace, charging him with fraud, conspiracy, and professional misconduct. The contents of Vanessa's attic formed the backbone of the case. Since the lawsuits were sealed, Philip would be caught off guard, and Marissa and Vanessa would remain unaware for now. At home, Dorian kept up appearances, continuing to act like a man falling apart. Nina also played her role masterfully. In casual conversation with Marissa, she let slip that Dorian had been in contact with divorce attorneys. As intended, the bait was taken. That evening, Marissa approached him with feigned concern. "Hey," she said, trying to sound casual, "I was thinking, maybe it's time we updated our wills. Philip said he could help. He's done estate stuff before." Dorian nodded vaguely, eyes distant. "If you think that's a good idea. He'll stop by tomorrow with the forms. Nothing major, just updates." Dorian gave a practiced shrug. "Whatever works." Later that night, while Marissa slept, Dorian and Nina moved silently through the house. They carefully hid pieces from Vanessa's archive in strategic locations. Subtle, not obvious, but easily discoverable if someone went looking. Everything was now set for Philip's visit. He arrived the next day, smug and self-assured, briefcase in hand. Dorian welcomed him with the air of a man defeated. They sat in the living room while Philip casually explained the documents, presenting them as routine paperwork for estate planning. In reality, the forms would transfer complete control of Dorian's assets to Marissa. As Philip laid out the documents, Dorian's phone rang. He stood, excused himself, and walked into the kitchen to take the call, intentionally leaving behind his signature pen, the one he always used to finalize official documents. It was the perfect trap. The moment Dorian exited the room, Philip quietly retrieved a pen and began altering several documents with subtle precision. With the ease of someone who'd done it many times before, he added hidden clauses, unaware that every movement was being captured by the hidden cameras Dorian had installed earlier. When Dorian returned, he casually signed the papers without giving them a second glance, playing the part of the naive, trusting partner with convincing indifference. Philip, suppressing a smirk, gathered the documents. "I'll get these processed right away," he said, folding them neatly. "Just a formality. To protect you, of course." "Of course," Dorian echoed, leading him to the door. "Appreciate your help, Philip." As soon as Philip's car disappeared from the driveway, Nina stepped out of the guest bedroom where she'd been monitoring the feed live. "He took the bait," she confirmed. "Tampered with 3 of them, added illegal clauses after you walked out." Dorian gave a measured nod. "Perfect. We've got clear footage of him committing fraud." What Philip didn't know was that the papers he left with weren't genuine. They were elaborate decoys. Submitting them would immediately trigger red flags with the state bar. But more importantly, the sting had worked exactly as planned. Every step carefully orchestrated. The trap had been sprung. Now, all they had to do was wait for it to snap shut. The next morning, just as Philip reached the steps of his office, he was intercepted and handed a formal notice. By noon, He received a call from the state bar, launching an investigation into serious professional misconduct. By 3 o'clock, agents from the Financial Crimes Division walked into his law firm, armed with a warrant built entirely on the evidence Dorian had anonymously provided. Meanwhile, across town, Marissa was browsing through boutiques when a short, urgent message lit up her phone. "Come home. Emergency." When she rushed through the front door, she found Dorian seated at the kitchen table, composed and unreadable, with several neatly stacked folders in front of him. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice anxious, dropping her shopping bags by the counter. "Have a seat, Marissa," he said in a calm, low tone. Something about his demeanor made her obey immediately. Vanessa appeared from the living room, visibly tense. Nina stood quietly off to the side, arms crossed, watching everything unfold. "Philip Wallace was taken into custody 2 hours ago," Dorian began, his tone almost conversational. "He's facing charges for fraud, conspiracy, and professional misconduct. Investigators are also pursuing evidence of a larger scheme, targeting affluent clients through orchestrated deception." Marissa turned pale. "What does that have to do with us?" Dorian gave a dry, humorless smile. "You're really asking that?" He opened the first folder and slid it across the table. Inside were printed copies of emails between Marissa and Philip, dating back nearly 2 years. "Maybe this will jog your memory," he said. Vanessa moved toward the table, trying to interject. "Now let's not jump to—" "No," Dorian snapped. "You don't get to speak. I know everything. The wiped files, the missing records, your entire plan to take the company, the house, everything. I've known for weeks." He opened another folder, revealing printed transcripts, verbatim records of their conversations, obtained through his covert home surveillance system. "This is illegal," Marissa stuttered. "You can't just record people like that." "In this state," Dorian replied icily, "I can record anything said inside my home, especially when it involves a criminal conspiracy." Vanessa attempted a softer tone. "Dorian, you've misunderstood. This is all a huge mix-up." "Enough," Nina interrupted. "I helped him find your storage boxes, Mom. Every single one." Vanessa collapsed into the nearest chair, color draining from her face. "It's all been submitted," Dorian continued. "Your entire pattern of fraud, every prior victim, all preserved in the records you so carelessly held on to." He paused, letting the weight of it settle. "Philip's being offered a deal right now. Turn on both of you or go down alone." "You're lying," Marissa whispered. Dorian tapped his phone, playing a voicemail. Philip's voice, frantic and broken, poured from the speaker. "They've got everything. The Carter scam, the Barnes job, it's all in the files. Don't contact me again. My lawyer says full cooperation is my only chance." Marissa reached for her phone in a panic, but Dorian raised a hand. "Don't bother. Your bank accounts are frozen. And that hidden fund you moved around? It's been reversed, flagged, and traced. Every step documented." "You can't do this," she spat, shaking with rage. "I'll tell everyone you were violent, that you're mentally unstable." "No one will believe that," Dorian said, his voice like a blade. "Not with the evidence I have, not with your history. Wesley Barnes is flying in tomorrow to give a sworn statement. He won't be the only one." It happened fast. So fast neither Marissa nor Vanessa could react. The trap they'd helped build had been used to destroy them. "You have half an hour to pack a bag," Dorian said, glancing at his watch. "After that, security's locking down the house. You won't be allowed back in." "This is my home too," Marissa shouted, her voice cracking. Dorian slid a final document across the table. "No," he said flatly. "It's not. Remember those refinancing papers you asked me to sign?" Dorian's tone was calm, measured. "The ones you quietly swapped out?" He offered a faint smile. "I switched them back. Only this time I made a few enhancements." his eyes locked onto hers. You unknowingly signed away your stake in this entire property to a trust. You're off the hook now, Marissa, completely. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Vanessa began to tremble, tears silently sliding down her face as the realization sank in. Marissa's expression twisted with rage. You think this is over? She hissed. You haven't seen what I'm capable of. Oh, but I have, Dorian said, his voice turning ice cold. Ever since your mother accidentally erased my records, I've kept myself 3 steps ahead. That was the moment everything changed. He glanced at his watch. 27 minutes remaining. Neither Marissa nor Vanessa made a move. It was Nina who finally broke the silence. Come on, Mom, she said gently but with quiet authority. Let's start packing. She took her mother's arm and guided the broken woman toward the stairs. Marissa remained rooted in place, glaring daggers at Dorian. After a long, tense pause, she sneered, I never loved you, not even for a second. Dorian didn't react. I know, he said evenly, which is why I'll sleep just fine tomorrow night when they slap on the cuffs. He began organizing his files. Time's running out, Marissa. Use what's left wisely. 6 months later, Dorian stood on the balcony of his skyscraper office, surveying the city skyline. The ink had dried on the Larson acquisition, doubling his firm's market value overnight. The legal fallout for Marissa, Vanessa, and Philip was unfolding exactly as he had predicted. Philip Wallace, once a hotshot attorney, had flipped under pressure, securing a plea deal and testifying against his former allies. His law license was gone, his assets seized, and though his sentence was reduced, he still faced 5 years behind bars. His reputation was beyond repair. Vanessa had suffered a minor stroke during her arraignment, which softened the court's stance. Her sentence was likely to be suspended, but financially she was finished. Years of hidden gambling debts and a history of exploiting wealthy men through her daughter had finally come to light. Marissa, as ever, refused to yield. Despite overwhelming evidence, she refused any plea deal. Her trial was set for the next month, with multiple prior victims ready to testify. She had made numerous attempts to contact Dorian, sometimes threatening, sometimes pleading, but every message had been carefully documented and passed along to the prosecution. A knock on the door pulled him from his thoughts. Raymond stepped in. "Board meeting's about to start," he said. "The expansion plans have everyone buzzing." Dorian gave a nod and turned away from the window. "Thanks for standing with me through all this." Raymond offered a quiet smile. "After what you did for me during the Phoenix mess, I'll never be able to repay that." He paused. "Heard from Nina recently?" "She calls every week," Dorian said. "She's thriving at her research job in Seattle." He allowed himself a rare, soft smile. "She's the only good thing that came from that entire family." As they made their way to the boardroom, Raymond hesitated. "There's talk going around," he said carefully. "People are wondering if, maybe, you went too far. Not in business. Personally. You left them with nothing." Dorian stopped walking, his expression hardening. "They came after everything. My name, my company, my life. Just like they'd done to others before me." Raymond held his gaze, uncertain. "If I'd shown even a trace of mercy," Dorian continued, "they'd have turned it into a weapon. That's what they do. There's no compromise with people like that. The only thing they respond to is consequence. Complete, final." Raymond gave a slow nod. "Yeah, I understand." Inside the boardroom, the air buzzed with anticipation. Dorian had become something of a legend, a cybersecurity expert who hadn't just thwarted an internal plot, but leveraged it into staggering success. The executives around the table saw only the results, not the calculated orchestration behind them. Even Raymond had only glimpsed the full extent of it. Dorian hadn't acted out of bitterness or revenge. He'd identified a threat and surgically removed it. That evening, back at the house Marissa had once coveted enough to destroy a marriage over, Dorian sat in his study, reviewing the last report from his private investigator. Marissa was still reaching out, scrambling to rally old contacts. None had answered. Dorian's strategic leak of damning evidence had seen to that. Every bridge was burned. His phone buzzed with a message from an unrecognized number. "You've taken everything. Hope you're happy." He blocked the number without a second thought. She still didn't understand. This was never about revenge or satisfaction. It was about inevitability. She started the war. He ended it, and every betrayal has its cost. Dorian had simply ensured his choices rose to meet the height of his aspirations. With that chapter firmly closed, he felt a quiet vindication in how things had unfolded. Marissa and her cohort had tried to turn his trust into a weapon, taking advantage of the vulnerability that comes with sincere relationships. What they hadn't foreseen was his capacity to sever that bond completely, to respond to their betrayal not with sorrow, but with clinical detachment, treating it as a violation that required containment and erasure. Their downfall hadn't come from a sloppy strategy, but from a fatal error in judgment. They had chosen the wrong person to deceive. They had marked Dorian as an easy mark, an elite mind, wealthy, and seemingly unaware of the subtleties of deception. What they failed to grasp was that the same intelligence that constructed impenetrable systems could just as easily dismantle their scheme, piece by calculated piece. He filled a glass with water, never liquor, regardless of how flawlessly he had pretended otherwise for their benefit, and raised it in silent recognition of the aftermath, of the wreckage they'd left behind. Our story comes to an end here. Share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for taking the time to watch. If you enjoyed this story, please check out other videos on this channel. See you soon, my dear friend.